Welcome back to the Neo Marketing Podcast. I'm Pritch Pritchard here with Kyle Golding, and today we're going to hit you with some how-to related to communication planning.
Welcome to the Golding Group Neo Marketing Podcast, a bi-weekly discussion of modern business communication.
Kyle, how are you, sir?
Fantastic. You caught me with a little coffee in my mouth, and I'm good to go now.
You're good to go. Always better with coffee.
Yeah, at least I didn't, spit it everywhere. Yeah. We'd have to stop and clean that mess up.
I wasn't trying to snarf you, but that would have been a bonus, right?
We would have definitely used that as some outtake for the jazz, for sure.
Right, exactly. The subject of communication planning is on my mind because...
At all times, I think.
Yes, but particularly now because we're doing some planning, a communication plan for one of our clients.
It's the time of the year. Fourth quarter is always, if you're not planning for next year in the fourth quarter, you're way behind.
Yep, exactly. And my campaigns class on campus at the University of Oklahoma is at that stage in their planning as well. So top of mind, and I kind of like to mix it up a little bit. We talk philosophy a lot, but I think it's important to do some how-to every once in a while as well. So
I agree.
Here's my thoughts on how you organize a communication plan.
Sounds good. Yeah.
Okay, cool. First and foremost, you got to start with goals.
Yeah.
What a concept.
You don't know where you're going,
right? Exactly.
Until you set that spot on the map.
Exactly. A lot of how-tos will tell you that it's an objective, and I argue that that's not an objective; it's a goal.
Goals for first.
Goals
Objectives fall out of goals.
Absolutely. So goals, for example, would be create greater awareness, encourage stakeholders to listen, encourage stakeholders.
Goals should be big ideas.
Yeah, big ideas. Not how to.
Yes.
But big ideas.
And
right?
Goals are also, they have to be realistic in something that can be accomplished quarterly, it's be measurable as well. But it also is something, you can't play it super safe.
Right.
So somewhere in between outlandish, we're going to, make $100 million next year and, let's break even. Somewhere in the middle of there is setting goals that will push the organization in the right direction.
Right. And I think it's important in a communication plane to be realistic, but to push yourselves.
Yes.
Right, to do things.
For sure. And too many people, when you got to create a plan or a report for the boss.
Right.
Everyone tends to get real conservative. Like, when overpromise and underdeliver. But if you don't make a plan for over-delivery, then you have the potential to handcuff yourself.
Yeah. I do think goals need to be really simple. I think they need to be aggressive, certainly. But I think where most of that comes into play is later when we're building our objectives, and that's when you need to get really aggressive.
Yes.
So after your goals, it's usual to provide an overview of your communication approach. It's kind of like an executive summary.
Sure.
And I wouldn't recommend building it sequentially this way, because after you're done with the plan, then you can go back and talk about, this is our approach. We're going to use traditional media. We're going to use social media. Right. We're going to use
influencers, inbound,
right?
Push pull,
maybe direct mail. It could be, we're going to do special events. Those types of things. But that's your general. Think of it. That second section is your executive summary.
Right.
Then of course we've got to have our objectives.
Sure.
Right. So objectives are SMART. You've heard this. Everybody's heard this, right?
Simple, measurable,
achievable, realistic, and the time frame.
There you go.
There we go. This is an area where a lot of practitioners mess up. I mean, they think the objective is the goal, right, and they ignore the objective section of it. To have an effective objective, in addition to SMART, you've got to have measurement and you've got to have a time frame in there.
Absolutely. I mean, in fact, honestly, if you work in marketing, advertising, any kind of communication at all, and you don't understand measurables and timetables, then you learn something real quick or get out of this game.
Right.
Because it's all about measurables and timetables.
Exactly. And particularly because on the communications front, we're dealing with non-financial indicators like trust and confidence and relationship. And it's really hard to measure that stuff to begin with. But if you leave it out of the objectives, you're crippling yourself. You're never going to be able to accurately define how well your plan did.
It's also the reason we start really broad at goals and go down to objectives, which is a further definition of the goals and how they can be achieved or reaching those objectives before we get into I know what you'll talk about next, which of course is tactics. But each time you go down these levels of specificity is how you continue to add more and more of this is how this will work. So you don't have a specific number in your goals. Again, 1 million downloads isn't your number. It's an achievement of better downloads over year, or
right.
something. But in the objectives and in the tactics is where you get into this. Measurables have to be started getting baked in.
Have to bake it in. Right. Otherwise, you don't know how you're going to evaluate, right?
You have to define success before you start.
Before you start.
It's something I say to people all the time, and people sometimes will give me a little bit like, huh? Being successful is many things to many people, and your department might be like, we're killing it this year, and the boss is sitting in the CEO's office going, those guys stink.
They need to up
you
their
all
game.
have to agree on what success is before you start,
right.
Because if you do it while you're in the process, you're just sort of adapting to the situation, and you're sort of covering your own ass at that point. Set your definition of success before you go in. It could change. That's fine, but you can't make it up on the fly,
right?
Because that's not a real definition. It's literally just saying what the day needs.
And you need to measure continually. It's not just set your measurement at the beginning and then evaluate it at the end. You got to be checking things at benchmarks along the way.
Yes, absolutely.
The other thing about objectives that I don't think a lot of practitioners think about is that people are at 3 levels of learning. Right. The first level is I need to be aware of it. Right. So there should be an objective for awareness.
For sure.
And that's usually the easiest to gain. So your number is going to be bigger there, say 75% within the next 6 months. Right. The second level is a little bit amorphous, and that's acceptance or attitude.
Mm-hmm.
So once you go from awareness, then you develop an attitude towards whatever it is.
Hopefully positive.
And if you better write your objective positive, right? Not quite as easy to achieve, so your number is going to be a little bit lower.
Certainly,
but maybe 50%.
You're continuing to define your audience, and the numbers that drop off are the ones that you weren't going to ever execute on anyways.
Right, and then there are people that are ready to take action, and so you have an action objective, and that's the lowest number, but that's where we want to get to.
Where the action is.
Absolutely. So once you've built your objectives, then you need to take a look at the situation. And particularly, you need to define your target stakeholders.
Certainly.
And that needs to be pretty specific because you have to know what their information needs are. You have to know what their pain points are. You have to know what their basic behaviors are.
Their information preferences.
Right. Their goals, their motivations, exactly. And what we like to do then is to turn all of that data, demographics, sociographics, and psychographics, into a persona.
Right.
Just like in writing, to turn an inanimate object into something you can understand, you personify that inanimate object. What we're doing with a persona is to take the data and find the typical person that fits that data.
Yes.
And make up that persona, hitting their pain points, hitting their information needs and preferences, hitting their motivations.
I like to call them Becky and Rick. That's just me.
There we go. So, and this is really kind of the fun part. You can get real creative with it.
You can have a little bit of fun with it. At the end of the day, they're real people. You can only go so far with demographics and sort of norms.
Right.
But it will inform you very far down the path of how to get in front of an audience with a message that can potentially resonate.
And now you've done all that homework. You know what your goals are. You know what your objectives are. You know who your target stakeholders are. Now it's time for key messages. Right. And key messages aren't long.
No. Again, keep it simple.
Keep it simple.
Yes.
Bumper sticker-ish,
yes,
if you will. And you could arrange them according to different audiences. You can arrange them in a progression. But this is where you really need to hone your message.
And again, that's why keep it simple is the key here, because simple message will resonate, and the process of honing that message down is simplification.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And our attention spans are so short
Yep.
today.
Yep.
The shorter the message, the more memorable the message,
Too
the
much
more you're
stimulus
retain
in the
it.
world that if your message isn't clear, it'll go right over people's head, and they really won't connect to it at all.
Right. Okay. So after your key messages, then you have to figure out your timing.
Yes,
If you don't have a timeline, then, you're willy-nilly. You're not really planning.
that's right.
You're just kind of executing on a whim.
Just waiting for something to happen.
Exactly.
Which is not smart business.
So a lot of different tools out there. Everybody's heard of Gantt charts, right? I have a simple one that I learned in the military. It's called a plan of action and milestones. So you have the action that needs to take place. You've got the time that it needs, that the due date, if
Right.
you will, and then who's going to execute that. And then the last column is when it's completed. So it actually ends up becoming a checklist for you and for your client. And it's pretty simple. Start backwards from the last thing you have to accomplish and then work your way into the steps that have to take place to get that particular
Makes
goal.
perfect sense.
You're probably going to have a budget section
You're absolutely going to have a budget.
because I don't, earned media is quote unquote free, lowercase f.
Well, yeah, there's a lot of work to earn
There
it.
is a lot of work to earn it, absolutely. But then
That work costs money.
there's paid media, there's organizational media. There are things that you are going to billboards if you have to. The special event's going to cost you some money.
For sure.
So you should build in a budget for what your plan is going to cost you.
This is where a lot of times when I talk to clients, potential clients, etc., start talking about budget, and you start talking about, for me, always like the first, like, I don't know anything about your business. Let's have this basic conversation. It's a percentage of sales you dedicate to budget. No matter what that percentage is or number is, they always freak out. Oh my God, that's a lot of money, right? But what they don't realize is they're really spending almost all of that already anyways. Like you said, there's events and things that they're already doing. There's community support, but there's also things like continuing education, professional dues, travel to trade. We do a trade show. It costs $1,000. Well, no, the booth space itself costs $1,000, but all the material you printed to go with it, the travel for the people, the time off work, all this other stuff equates to the budget for the trade show that you get to count back towards this big number that right now looks really like a huge number.
Right.
Like, I'm not going to spend that much money on advertising. That's right. Not on advertising, on the bulk of what your marketing should be and all of the cost associated with it. So don't get freaked out about a budget number being big, because it more than likely, no matter what type of business you're in, you're spending that money anyways. You just haven't designated it as marketing.
Right. You haven't designated it to a line item yet. And that's really helpful, just like in your household.
The hotel room and the rental car to go to a trade show is part of the cost of marketing.
Their salary. I mean, there's a lot more to it than just the event space.
The $50 an hour you got to pay the forklift teamster to move a crate for you. It takes 6 minutes.
Right.
But
you're paying $50.
That cost is part of your marketing budget.
Got to capture it. Absolutely. And then the
no offense to Teamsters. You guys are great.
Yeah, exactly.
If you've ever done a trade show, you know what I'm talking about.
Exactly. Yeah. In the Navy, it was amazing what a pound of coffee could get you from a shipyard worker.
Yeah, there you go.
Including a forklift. Anyway, I digress. The next section is communication tools. Mm-hmm. So here you're outlining, Facebook, email, social media, Instagram, traditional media.
Print,
direct mailers.
Out of home.
Maybe it's a editorial board or
events,
committee meeting, events, those sorts of things. So it's important and break them into internal tools and external tools. And then it's just a column. It's yes, no. We're going to do this or we're not going to do this. Or we have done this and we're not going to do this. And then
something about that, though, when you get down into the tools within the budget, I like to put them all together and look at them from just dollars and cents, like we're spending $10,000 here, $500 here, but also then percentage-wise for the overall budget.
Right.
Because sometimes people will tell you, like, oh, we spend a lot of money on that, or we barely ever spend anything on this, and they don't really know until you get all those actual costs in, and you start doing percentage-wise. And sometimes what doesn't seem like a whole lot of money might be a large percentage of your budget that you may say we should spend more or less if you get to kind of look at it in these different formats. And so I like to do that with clients to really give them a very informed decision of where their money is going, what the effectiveness of all these things are, and then make sure there's a huge mix. Don't put all your eggs in one basket, right? So if it's 90%, TV,
right,
even if the TV is working, that's a bad math scenario for you. So by taking everything and put it into a plan, and then breaking it down by percentage and dollars spent, ranking them, and having that conversation about does this make sense from a overall not all our eggs in one basket perspective.
Right.
Sometimes you will spend less on things that people are like, but it works, but the percentages are just not right for a balanced approach to marketing.
Exactly. And another trick that's helpful sometimes is to have a tiered budget.
Yeah.
So here's the Ferrari, here's the Cadillac, here's the Volkswagen. And what you can get out of each of those. Sometimes that makes the budget discussion a little bit easier with clients, but so things to think about. And the last section, of course, is evaluation. How did we do? Well, we baked those numbers in at the objective stage, right? So now it's just figuring out how we're going to measure those things.
That's right.
Surveys, all of the methodologies come to pass. Focus groups, interviews, content analysis.
It's not just sales numbers, people.
No, it's not just sales numbers.
At the same time, going back to what I mentioned earlier about kind of creating this report or this budget plan for your boss, everyone gets afraid of locked into numbers. You're not going to hit every number.
Right.
No one ever has. If you have, congratulations, you're the best marketer on the planet.
Well,
marketing is
a poor planner because you set your numbers too
right.
low.
But part of your job is to understand that not everything will work, and you will need to make adjustments.
Yes.
So the things that fall short are not failures in that, hey, someone should get fired over this. Outside of like you hit 1% out of instead of 50%. But understand it will happen when you set the numbers that guide you into we need to make adjustments here, or this is performing as well as possible. Maybe even this is overperforming. We could take some of that budget, some of the attention, some of the staff, manpower, et cetera, and move it over here to the things that missed their numbers.
Yes.
And again, so it's not a failure in the whole, like you guys all are no good at your job.
Right.
It's paying attention to what your audience and what the industry and what the market is paying attention to, and then refocusing along the way, again, budget, whether it's pure cash, time spent, attention, etc.
Well, and just because the evaluation section is the last section, what you're talking about is monitoring and measuring throughout the campaign.
Well, the truth is, a campaign, a singular campaign is typically a slick period, and probably, if you have a campaign going more than 1 or 2 quarters, it's a little crazy. You need to be refined. But when we talk about a marketing budget, we're talking about a budget for the year, for the department, for the organization. We're talking about a year or 2 sometimes, and then you can break those down between half year, quarter, monthly, and then you get down when you get down into weekly reporting, it gets so number centric. I'm not a fan of it. Yeah. Some people kind of feel like they need it to see how things are moving. If your business is really seasonal, or there's a really specific spike that you have to hit, or you're gonna really be in trouble,
right.
I can get behind that. But then the exact opposite time of the year, you can't be like, this week's numbers were 1% off. You can't get panicked about that stuff.
Exactly.
But everything gets. If this is a budget for the year, you can't forget about the half year, the quarters, etc.
Right.
Because those are the perfect opportunities, whether it's calendar driven or something else, to just take your time, do your evaluations, make your adjustments, because not everything is going to work according to plan.
Right.
Have those discussions, and you'll be stronger every time you make that next quarter, that next half of the year.
And that goes back to
and honestly,
objectives.
So then I'll backtrack on myself. I love that. If you get to the end of the year and you have things that didn't come close to meeting their goals, but you're just now realizing it, and you have not made any adjustments to that point because you weren't doing those regular check-ins and regular adjustments. Now you're someone I want to go, send to the boss's office to have a discussion about whether you're the right person for this job or not.
Right.
So it's at the end of the year, if you're not hitting your numbers, it's not the end of the world. If you've been making incremental increases and adjustments and paying attention to and reporting on and evaluating along the way in order to make the best scenario you can.
Right.
If you get to the end of the year before you realize that you really screwed up, you've really screwed up.
You've really screwed up. It's exactly
That's the only way you could screw up, is waiting to the end of the year.
Yep. I agree. You might get lucky. I'm not counting on luck, though.
Nope. It's a bad business philosophy.
Right? A plan doesn't rely on luck.
Yes.
So anyway, that's my 2 cents on building a communication plan. It's a little different than a campaign plan because it's focused on, amazingly enough, communication.
Right.
Right. But it shares some elements of a complete campaign. But there you go. I think it's really important before we pick up the phone and call a reporter. Is this a one-off, or is it part of an integrated plan?
And I think more important than anything else, if you guys take this from this discussion today, is you saw how quickly we talked through that, and with discussion in between and everything else. You need a plan, and it's a guide system for you, but don't overthink it. Just get in there and get it started.
Get it started.
Get it done. Start pushing numbers around. It's a rough draft. It becomes a final draft in the process. So don't be intimidated by it.
Right.
Get in there and do it. There are plenty of references online of these elements here involved that you can look at for examples. And the last thing is, too many people, it goes back to, there's the whole, I don't want my boss to know if I'm hitting my numbers or not, but also too many people look at planning like this, really detailed planning, as a restriction. Well, what if we want to change our mind about social media in 6 months?
Right.
It's not about restricting you from having good ideas or taking advantage of situational issues or seasonal or other things like that, or changes in technology it doesn't keep you from doing that. It just keeps you from being smart and asking the right questions before you make those decisions.
Right. It's an evergreen document. Right. And I relate it to mapping out a trip, okay? We went down to Austin recently for my youngest son's wedding, right? So we had to figure out which way we were going to go. And 35 was just an absolute mess, and this was on a Thursday. So
that happens a lot.
We made the adjustment to come back through Lawton, and it actually saved us some time. That's the plan. The plan, it didn't restrict us to have to come back through 35.
But you had the best route, the second best route, the third best route, the fourth best route. You didn't just take down some country road that you didn't know where it led to. So it was an informed decision, but the situation forced you to make that call. And you still made the next best decision, not any decision that came up.
Right, exactly.
There you go.
That's the value of having your plan in place before you get started.
I like it.
Cool. So that's it for this week. We want you to hit that subscribe button, give us some feedback, shout at us, tell us we're horrible, whatever, right? Tell us we're full of...
We'll take it all in.
We'll take it all in, absolutely. But we would love to respond to your comments. So keep watching us. And until then, ciao.
Good luck.